Hi, my name is Barbara Osach. Thank you, Shanice, for inviting me here today to tell a story. And thanks to all of you in the audience for the generosity that you bring to your listening. The story I'm going to tell you is not an artistic creation. So it's not poetry or music or theater, but it is a story about the experience of creating a future. In telling you this story, it's my goal that you see that your access to creativity, self-expression, and empowerment is there for you to have. And it's my intended outcome that you'll be moved to action in your own life to dream and to fulfill on those dreams. I'm president of a nonprofit organization called Academy of Mastery. Empowering people to have access to lifelong economic self-sufficiency, financial freedom, and independence is at the heart of our programs. The Nonprofit Alliance for Homeownership is a program I help create for Academy of Mastery. It helps people who want to be homeowners do the work they need to do to buy and keep a home of their own. Most of the people we work with are first-time homebuyers, and many of them are the first in their families to ever own a home. Every one of the hundreds of people who are in this program or who have completed it successfully started with a dream for the future, a yearning for something different. And most at the beginning didn't really believe that it was possible, and they couldn't see how they could get there. And while the particulars of the circumstances each one of them had to deal with varied, they all had enough faith to do what was unfamiliar and uncomfortable for the sake of the future they could envision, and not one of them did it alone. Do you have a dream, a vision, or maybe you call it a fantasy about a future for your life? I assert that you do, or you wouldn't be here today. So listen, and even though we know that your life circumstances are unique to you, and know that whether you're hoping to be a homeowner, or you are like me seeking to create a legacy, or you are you dreaming about your future, we all as human beings are dealing with the same human feelings, instincts, and reactions, and that by understanding those things that make us human, we have access to choices that can make those dreams a reality. So listen up, this is about your life, your future. For each of us, things happen in our lives that shape us. There are people and events that have a lasting impact on us, although we may not always realize the full impact until much later. We make decisions about ourselves and others and about how life works that become a filter through which we see life, past, present, and future. And these decisions we make and the filters we create are largely invisible and undistinguished to us. I also believe that when we can see those decisions and filters for what they are, we can then shift our perspective, and that changes what we believe is possible and what opportunities we can recognize. It changes our reality. In sharing my experiences and the decisions I made and the filters I see I put on my life, I hope you'll recognize those events in your life that have shaped you, and see something that you hadn't seen before that creates new possibilities for you. Now, I know this may sound silly, but I had a leading part in a school play in second grade. I was going to be a chirkendoose, part chicken, part turkey, and part goose, and wear a fantastical feathered costume and dance the Charleston, which I had practiced for hours and hours. But alas, I would not get to wear the feathered costume or be the star. You see, only weeks before the play, my mother, struggling to get her life together after a divorce, sent my brother and sister and me to live with my grandparents in California. Reality formation. I do all the work, but someone else gets to wear the feathered costume and dance the Charleston on stage. My mother collected us from California and remarried. My stepfather was kind and quiet. Junior high school started, new school, new girl, new family, and a new name. My stepfather adopted my brother, sister, and me. Now, finally, I wouldn't have to offer up lame explanations about why my name was different than my parents' name, as this was a rare and embarrassing thing to have to do for a 13-year-old at the time. By 8th grade, I had been in 6 schools and always came into a school in the middle of a school year. Like most teenagers, I thought I was the only one who felt like an outsider. All I wanted was to fit in, not stick out and not be noticed, but there I was, always the new girl. I became adept at quickly blending in and adapting to the people around me so I wouldn't attract attention or be shipped off to California. My high school years were wonderful. I even made my way to the stage. Memories of Chirk-and-Deuce dancing in my head as one of the Nutty Pigeon sisters in our senior play production of The Odd Couple. I graduated from high school in 1969. It was the summer of the first moon landing, which was the fulfillment of a dream that President Kennedy had shared with the nation. And it was the summer of Woodstock. I was there, and it was awesome. I was 17 and about to enter college at Bucknell University. I was in love with a boy and in love with the future. While at Bucknell, I was asked to write a paper about the nature and destiny of man. I don't know why that topic set me off, but I handed in a scathing indictment of the assignment, calling it a futile exercise with an unknowable answer. I got an F on the paper, but I have never forgotten what the professor wrote in his comments. He said, "Until you commit yourself fully to something in life, you will never truly know who you are." I scoffed at his words at the time, but they stuck with me. I finished college with a degree in English language and literature. It was the height of affirmative action hiring, and my first job was with a computer company selling adding machines and electronic calculators, quite the novelty at the time, door to door into businesses in downtown Boston. I wasn't wanted, but I was necessary to fulfill a hiring quota. I was terrified of selling. It's really hard to blend in doing that. But I was determined to prove that I was up to the job. I did well enough at first to qualify for training on programmable bookkeeping machines. I soon discovered that I excelled at programming and eventually switched from sales to programming within the company. I didn't know it then, but it was a great move. I was terrible at sales. I was afraid of talking to people, afraid of being rejected, and I had spent hours each day walking around avoiding making sales calls. Programming was completely different. I didn't have to go out, talk to people, or sell anything, and I was already good at it. I rapidly advanced. In the 1970s, before the internet, before email or personal computers or cell phones, I was a systems engineer for a mini computer company that was developing office automation software. I was one of only a handful of people in the company who embraced word processing because at the time I was writing a thesis for a master's program and I was a poor typist. So word processing was a godsend. I really liked my job, but when I was passed over for a promotion, I left. Chirk-and-Deuced again. I was hired as an office automation analyst by General Electric, and my first assignment was to develop training courses for executive secretaries to make the transition from typewriters to word processors. I suspect many of you listening have never used a typewriter, but think about how you would feel if the main tool that you use for your job is suddenly replaced with something completely different and foreign, and your job depends on you making the change. That's how it was for the secretaries. Piloting those word processing courses to the first group of executive secretaries was a disaster. Like any good techie at the time, I wrote the training program like an operational manual, starting at the upper left, explaining the operation and function of each menu item, which seemed perfectly logical and reasonable to me. However, by 10:30 on the first morning of a 3-day program, the secretaries were up in arms. They were screaming that the course was confusing and that they couldn't understand why they had to learn this stupid machine when they were already very good with a typewriter and had done very well without all this new stuff. Thank you very much. Well, it was one of the most valuable lessons I've learned. I knew how great a word processor could be for them, but they were resisting and struggling, and we were getting nowhere. I stepped back, heard what they had to say, and revamped the entire approach to the training. I started with what they already knew, the typewriter, and began building the training from there, so they had a context in which to hear and absorb what was coming next. At each step they learned and could see the benefit to them of the tools they were being asked to adopt. We ended with things that a word processor could do that couldn't be done on a typewriter, which actually got them excited. The program was a success, and hundreds of secretaries made the transition to the new technology with confidence and cooperation. I didn't know what it was at the time, but this was my first experience of what we refer to as enrollment. It has 2 basic principles. The first is that you have to believe in what you want to enroll people into. The second is that you have to talk to people from their world, their experience, their context, about what's important to them. Only then can they see the value of what you're enrolling them into. Not any intrinsic value, but the value to them. My next job as a small business consultant for an international accounting firm brought together all the skills I had developed to that point. I wrote proposals for technical services, enrolled business owners into approving projects, deconstructed and reconstructed the business processes to design and build or buy systems to support them, and then enrolled employees into adopting and embracing the new technologies. I was promoted to management. So I was now in my early 30s, and by all measures, my life was good. My husband and I had purchased our first home. We belonged to a country club, had our health, lots of friends, and we both had great careers going. We were what was known then as dinks, double income, no kids, and life was good. But I was driving to work one morning, and I remember clear as if it were right now, thinking, is this it? Is this all there is to life? I remember the comment of my Bucknell professor and thought, I need to commit myself to something. I should have a baby. It was a commitment, all right, but it didn't look the way I thought it was going to look. And being a working mom was a balancing act that was harder than I thought it would or should be. When my first son was just a toddler, one of my clients made me an offer that I turned into an opportunity to start my own consulting practice. It gave me more money and the flexibility any working mom needs to handle job and family without feeling torn and stressed. I had steady work for 12 years through repeat business and referrals, so I never had to market or sell my services, which was a good thing because I already knew I was terrible at sales. I didn't want the responsibility of employing anyone else who would be dependent on me for their livelihood, and so I was a one-woman show. During this time, my marriage was falling apart. We were much better together as dinks than we were as partners in parenting, and after 25 years of marriage, we divorced. So there I was in my mid-40s on my own for the first time in my life, having gone straight from my parents' home into marriage. Now the responsibility for myself and my kids weighed heavy. I was afraid. While my consulting practice had been steady, there was no guarantee of future work, and I knew I couldn't sell. So when a job opened up with a client, I gave up my practice and became an employee. Of all the decisions I've made in my life, this is the one I think about and wonder what would have happened if I hadn't let my fear cloud the future I saw and dictate my thinking and my actions. I could only see the downside of the future, having to work to support myself, stressing over where the next project would come from, no safety net or second income to fall back on if a project didn't come. That's the future I could see, and it justified my taking the employment. Putting up with office politics was a small price to pay for security, I thought. It wasn't that it was a bad career move, and in fact it turned out to be a good one in many ways, but looking back, I know that if I knew then what I know now about creating a future, I would have looked at things differently. I would have been able to envision success, even expansion of the business. I might have been willing to consider the possibility of hiring people to do what I thought I wasn't good at, sales and marketing. I might have started a business, not just been self-employed. But at the time, I couldn't see any of that in my future, not even as a possibility. In fact, I knew that it could never be that way. That made the decision to take the job so much easier. I'm spending a bit of time on this decision because it illustrates what we all go through when our security seems threatened and we face difficult or seemingly impossible tasks. We're human. Our drive to survive is exceedingly strong. And the threats we perceive to our identities, who we are in the world, our position in life, those threats are as real to us as threats to our physical world, and they elicit a primal response to survive. That instinct to survive filters what we see and affects what choices we think we have, and that affects the actions we take or don't take, and that, in the end, cements our future. So knowing that I would do all the work and wouldn't get to wear the feathered costume, that blending in was the way to be accepted, and that I was lousy at sales, I took the job. During this period, a friend invited me to a transformational seminar called the Landmark Forum. In it, I saw in an instant how my life was put together to keep me safe, to keep me ordinary, to keep me and others from expecting more from me than I was willing to give. And for an instant, I saw that I could be whoever I want to be, and that the future could be different and free from the past and from the present. It wasn't like I had a picture painted for the future me, but just a clear sense that something different was possible. I was intrigued and continued Landmark's curriculum for living. As an assignment in one of the seminars, Self-Expression and Leadership, I created a project to organize a career day at a high school. It required talking to people I didn't know, selling them on the idea. I was terrified, and my fear kept me from taking actions. I failed. There was no career day. But I did get to the core of my fears and saw that my fear not only cost me success in the project, it also cost the high school students who wouldn't have a career day because I was afraid. I had to acknowledge that I wasn't even in the game, and that made me mad at myself. What a waste. I joined a local nonprofit and started the Career Day project again. I began calling alumni of the high school. One of the alumni, Art Ratner, had a list and offered to call some of his old classmates. I had a team. My goal was to reach everyone on that list, and that meant I had to step out, call people I didn't know, introduce myself, and ask them to participate. I was not comfortable, but had had the experience to know what results would happen by staying comfortable. None. And so I made the calls for the project, for the kids, and for myself. I didn't know how it would turn out, and it didn't matter. I just kept playing. I was clear that what mattered was that I believed in what I was doing and that I did everything I could to have it turn out this time, and it did. There were more adults there to talk about their careers than there were upperclassmen to hear them, and the high school staff pulled in freshmen and sophomores to participate. Many years later, I met a teacher from the school who told me that Career Day was still an annual event. The teachers and administrators had picked up the ball and had run with it. Something I had envisioned and created still existed without me. I felt proud and humbled at the same time. Shortly afterward, I met a man who would change my life. His name is Richard Janimore, and he was at that time a Landmark seminar leader. As a team leader, my role was to communicate with my team weekly and let Richard know how my team was doing. Communicating with my team turned out to be more of a challenge than I thought it should be, and I let Richard know how uncooperative, unreliable, and uncommitted my teammates were, week after week after week. He'd try to coach me around leadership and team, around being with people without judging them or seeing them as being wrong in the way they behaved, or having their behavior mean something about me. He was standing for me to have freedom around people, the way they are and the way they aren't. For me. I couldn't hear him. Until one day Richard said to me, "I keep telling you, but you can't hear me. You're just being obstinate." Me? Obstinate? No, I was right. They were wrong. Obstinate. Huh. What an insult. And yet it didn't come across like an insult. It actually came across like an observation, not a judgment. And suddenly I could hear his coaching, and I could see that he was spot on. It was my obstinacy about how it should be, not my team, that was the root of my complaints and the cause of my dissatisfaction. And I hadn't been willing to accept my responsibility for how it was, which left me feeling powerless, which made me blame them. By accepting responsibility, I had power and freedom, no matter what my teammates did or didn't do. I participated in many other seminars with Richard, including a program he developed himself, The Road to Riches, which provides people with tools to empower themselves and have freedom around money, wealth, and finances. He is an unwavering stand for me to have freedom to create my life, for me to confront my fears and stand for myself in the face of uncertainty, of not knowing, of losing faith in my future and in myself. He talks to my greater self when I can no longer find that better part of me and brings me back to the reality that says, when you be the person you commit yourself to be in the world, and when you take actions that are consistent with and give expression to that being, you bring into reality the future you dare to dream. Most of us don't dare to dream big, whether it's losing out on the feathered costume, being cut off from those we love, or failing at the thing we want most to happen. Each of us has had that experience we don't want to repeat, and consciously, but mostly unconsciously, we avoid putting ourselves in situations we perceive to be similar, assuming the same unwelcomed outcome. We sit the game out rather than risk losing again. With Richard as my coach, I got into the game of creating my life. I began to take action on the dream that dared never be spoken for me, being a writer. It had always been my fantasy, the one I kept secret in my heart, to write the great American novel and be famous. And I was always afraid to commit pen to paper, fearing that my work would never measure up to my aspirations and that I would be humiliated and crushed by my failure. I'd like to tell you that I've won the Pulitzer Prize for my work, but I can't. I haven't written a novel, The Great American, or any other, but I did become a writer. Richard wanted to write a book about entrepreneurship, a subject he lives and believes in as the fabric of capitalism at its best. I sent out over 100 letters to literary agents explaining the book idea and asking them to represent Richard. I got 2 responses. The first was a no. The other was a maybe, with instructions for developing a full proposal. It took weeks to prepare, and finally I mailed it to the agent, along with a request for him to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is a standard document in practice and business that says the recipient may not share any information submitted with anyone else. A few weeks went by, and I started leaving phone messages for the agent, Michael Snell, to see if he had received the package and if he had had a chance to review it. My phone messages went unanswered, until finally one day Mike answered the phone and launched a tirade against the idea of a non-disclosure agreement, of how insulted he had been at the suggestion that he would need a contract to tell him not to violate a confidence, and that I had no chance of success in publishing because it's an industry built on trust and relationships. I was speechless, which was probably a good thing because I didn't have time to get on a high horse and try to justify my actions. I just listened. And I remembered the lesson I had learned at GE. Get over there in his world and understand where he's coming from before you try to have him see where you're going. When Mike had had his say and came up for air, I apologized to him for the offense I had given and hoped he would see it as an act of ignorance on my part, not a reflection on him. He was kind enough to listen. As the conversation drew to a close, I took a deep breath and dared to ask him if he would look at the materials and provide feedback. It was his turn to be speechless for a moment, but graciously he accepted. That book, The Entrepreneurial Experience, was written by Richard and was published in 2007, but as it turned out, not with Mike. Mike did, however, come to Richard and me with a proposal of his own. He had a publisher who was looking for someone to write a book for mortgage loan originators. Mike, knowing Richard's business was mortgages, asked if we were interested in the project. Richard and I collaborated on The High Income Mortgage Originator, which was published in 2008 by Wiley & Sons. And on the basis of working with us on that book, Mike suggested Richard and I write a book aimed at first-time homebuyers, pitch the proposal to American Management Association, and Navigating the Mortgage Minefield was published in 2009. I was a writer. I had books on the shelves at Barnes & Noble. More importantly, though, I had done something I had always wanted to do but had been afraid to try, and that is what I was and am most proud of. Was it the great American novel? No, but it was a darn sight closer than I ever would have been if I hadn't been willing to dare and get into the game. And I couldn't or wouldn't have done it without the support, coaching, and partnership with Richard and with Mike and with all the other people involved in bringing those books into the world. So why am I telling you this story? What's the secret desire you have that you can't speak, the one that your heart aches for? Who is that person you secretly imagine yourself to be, who you keep hidden from the world, afraid to be humiliated or to fail? That's the you for whom I'm telling the story, because there's a big world out there full of possibilities, of opportunities that come from disasters. And while the results may not always look the way we imagine them, you can be fulfilled. But you have to get in the game, and that means confronting your fears. The Academy of Mastery was formed in 2009 to produce an extraordinary after-school program called the Entrepreneurial Course for high school students. The course has randomly assigned teams of students create and generate money-producing businesses in 9 weeks. In the process, they get an experience of themselves as leaders with freedom and power. The course is an intense experience for students that gets them in the game. They have not only to deal with the startup of a money-making enterprise, they have to deal with themselves, the circumstances, the thinking, and the behaviors that stand in the way of their success in the game, and more importantly, in life. It's an extraordinary program, and I urge you to visit academyofmastery.org to view a short documentary about the program. It goes to the heart of what it takes to create and generate a business and a life, and I promise you'll be inspired by the students. I wanted to find a way to generate revenue to fund the entrepreneurial course independent of grants, which were becoming more difficult to obtain as the economy tanked and foundations shifted their focus to giving for basic needs like shelter and food. That's what I wanted, but I didn't know what that would look like. In early 2010, I found myself in need of a job, and Richard found himself in need of a customer service representative in his mortgage company, Mortgage Services, based in Waterbury, Connecticut. The mortgage business, once booming, was all but dead. With the economic collapse, requirements for affordable mortgages became more stringent. The number of people who were able to meet them shrank. And to add insult to injury, there were an increasing number of foreclosed homes on the market at very low prices that made home ownership appear to be affordable to people who might not ever have dreamed that home ownership was possible for them before that time. Richard was looking for a way to weather the storm and have his business, established in 1986, survive until the economy and the mortgage and real estate markets bounced back. He had created a service to assist people to meet mortgage requirements. Credit scores and credit history had become, and still are, an important component of mortgage qualification, and an area that many people have little knowledge of. Clients interested in home ownership completed an online questionnaire, and the service consisted of a credit analysis to determine what work that they would have to do to qualify for an affordable mortgage. There was a modest fee for the analysis, and my job was to contact the clients by phone, enroll them into the analysis, collect the fee, and set up the appointment with a loan specialist. As an aside, I think it's important that you understand that talking to strangers on the phone to ask them to pay for a credit analysis was nowhere near being in my comfort zone. In spite of the career day calls, in my mind this was different. This was more like selling, and I was pretty sure this wasn't going to be easy. While I no longer got nauseous when the time came to pick up the phone as I had years ago, I still sweated a lot and had to remind myself daily that I needed this job. Thank goodness Richard was exploring what would work. He was, as we say, in an inquiry about what was needed to serve people and what obstacles were stopping them from pursuing their dreams. A longtime student of human behavior and a consummate salesman, he realized that people had no relationship to the business or to me as a caller, and so didn't trust the proposition or the process. We worked together hours each day for months to talk about what people needed to feel safe and comfortable enough to move forward. We were asking people to trust us with their dream of owning a home, and we believed that a for-profit company would face a barrier in that initial conversation with clients, that it would be difficult to establish enough initial trust for clients to be able to take even a small step. Through Academy of Mastery, we created the Nonprofit Alliance for Homeownership program and had volunteers for the nonprofit make the initial outreach calls to clients. And we realized that we needed to provide clients with value before asking them to trust us, and created a 2-step process leading up to the enrollment for the credit analysis that educates them about mortgage qualification and the home buying process, all conducted by the Nonprofit Alliance. Now, if you think that we sat down and planned the program and had a business plan, you would be mistaken. The concept of NPAHO was new. There was no other business we could use as a model to project income or expenses. Not that the services were new. There were plenty of credit repair services out there, and plenty of mortgage companies and banks were still around to offer loans. But the idea of having a nonprofit working with for-profit companies to invest in people with no guarantee of compensation was novel. How do you ask professionals to volunteer their time and expertise? How do you get clients to appreciate the value of something they don't have to pay for? Enrollment. As we worked with people to make the changes in their financial habits needed to qualify for a mortgage and keep a home, we experienced with them the things that get in the way, the things that have people give up on the dream and on themselves. And we kept putting more conversations, more processes, more measures in place to prepare people for those moments so that they wouldn't give up. Since it took its present form at the end of 2011, the Nonprofit Alliance for Home Ownership has grown into a network of professionals who are willing to invest in clients and stake their compensation on the client's success. No one wins unless the client wins. That creates an extraordinary team dynamic. We each succeed by helping others succeed. We profit when others achieve what they want. To date, the Nonprofit Alliance for Home Ownership has helped over 130 families get the keys to their own homes. Every success story is a story of a client willing to give voice to a dream that seemed beyond achievement. Every success story is a story of people willing to do what was new and strange and uncomfortable and scary. Desiree, a nurse in Michigan, got up the nerve to ask for a raise and got it, and then had a heart-to-heart with her grown daughter about supporting herself and contributing to the household expenses, a conversation she had wanted to have for years but had avoided. And she was willing to learn new ways to manage her money so she was able to build her credit and get the keys to a home. Anna, stuck in a high-rent lease with an ex-boyfriend, took 2 part-time jobs to afford the apartment when her boyfriend moved out and before she could qualify for a mortgage. Anna, who came to understand what drove her to run up charge cards on QVC purchases and who was willing to curb her spending urges for the sake of owning a home. Every success story is a story about a person who had other people believing with them and pointing the way for them when they lost the way for themselves. We all need people like that in our lives. I've been privileged to know several who have done that for me, and now it's my honor to be that for others. I talk to new Nonprofit Alliance for Home Ownership clients every day. I've spoken to thousands of people, 1 or 2 at a time over the years, and I enroll them into taking the first steps to fulfill on their dreams of home ownership. And it turns out I've become pretty good at it. Who knew? I still have my fears, my concerns, my reactions to things that are not comfortable, including being on the radio. But I've learned through my own experiences and through witnessing clients in the Nonprofit Alliance for Home Ownership that being in action in the face of fear is a triumph, no matter what the results are. That when we put ourselves in another's shoes, we access the better part of our own humanity, and that people can and are moved when they are heard, understood, and have someone who believes in them. I finally came to understand what that college professor had been talking about. It was only in committing myself fully that I came to know who I am. I express myself in the life that I create, in the actions that I take. My creativity is unlimited as long as I'm willing to give it voice and be in action. Through the Nonprofit Alliance for Home Ownership, I will leave something that will endure beyond my life and the lives of those who know me. I wanted to touch the lives of people I never met, and here I am on the radio. If I can do it, you can do it. Stand up for what's possible for you. Share your dream. Be it. Do it. Have it.